The one topic when it comes to Toronto real estate that I don't talk about enough on my YouTube channel, which I honestly I should, because it's a huge part of the Toronto real estate market. It's a huge fundamental and a huge part of people's lives, because a lot of people are doing this currently, is the Toronto rental market. The rental market is actually something I'm very passionate about. Early on in my career, I did a lot of leases, helping clients find their next rental homes. I had the opportunity early on to really learn a ton about what the rental market was in Toronto, especially in the condo market. So something I'm passionate about, something I know a lot about. So adding my little bit of value where I can, for me, is really important when it comes to Toronto rentals. So in this video, I'm going to go over Rent Panda's Canadian monthly rental report for December 2022. It goes over a bunch of trends and analytics when it comes to looking at rents in a little bit more in detail. They're a big property management company that actually helps people find tenants, and they do a really good job in that sense. But they do really good in terms of getting data when it comes to working in all these Canadian cities and breaking them down a little bit better and showing off what the rental market really is in all these different cities. But before we get into that, my name is Gabriele Battista from Homes into Reality, and what I do every single week is I help first-time buyers, talking about first-time buyers in the city of Toronto, help first-time buyers get into the real estate market, either if that's renting, buying, help them on their real estate journey, and really support them through their goals so one day they'll be able to buy with confidence in a really busy and competitive Toronto real estate market. And if you're new here, stay a while, stay a little bit. I have lots of content for you to review when it comes to being a first-time buyer in Toronto. I post every single Thursday on YouTube, every Wednesday on Instagram, and every Tuesday I send out my newsletter, which you can sign up below, called Future Homeowners, where again, I educate first-time buyers in the city of Toronto until they're ready to buy their first home. Now back to the content. As a quick reminder, I am going through Rent Panda's report, so I'm going to leave their information in the description in terms of their services and the rental report to refer to. There's a ton of information here, so I'll be going through all the relevant information when it comes to Toronto, but I highly encourage you to check them out. Look at their services, look at their information. It's something you definitely can learn from, and I definitely myself am learning from them. First thing I'll speak about is what Rent Panda goes through is the looking forward into the rental market future. They go through predicting what 2023 will look like in terms of if rents will go up or go down, or if they stay pretty stable. They actually go through all the Canadian cities. So if you want to look at what other Canadian cities all across the country are looking like when it comes to rental prices, definitely take a look at their stuff. But we're going to go through Toronto stuff. But what they say here is we look back in the past 5 years of historical rental data to understand the trends by quarter. In conclusion, our biggest gains or increases are in rent in Q2 and Q3, while Q4 had the biggest downswing for rents. I tend to agree with a lot of that sentiment, especially with Q2 and Q3 being the busiest ones when it comes to the rental market. A lot of that being for a couple of factors. The number one in terms that affects all quarters of the rental market is that when it's unaffordable to buy, people are going to rent instead, of course. And with last year being a very not so friendly buying market for a lot of people, sales were down 50%. People are going to rent instead, which really pushed up demand. And with the Q2, Q3, that tends to lead up into the school year being September. A lot of international students in general, are looking for housing in downtown Toronto and in your school hubs. That's going to push up housing demand, especially because there's a really hard deadline for people to get into housing and really find their home. And as time gets closer to September 1st, for example, especially those summer months in late Q2 and early Q3, you're really going to get some really pent-up demand and much more aggressive bidding for people looking for homes before the school year starts. And then when we look at Q4, I tend to agree with that as well, because with Q2 and Q3 being as busy as they usually are, with again those deadlines, a very busy weather's nice, people are out seeing properties, finding their new homes during the summer, you're going to get a lot of that demand satisfied. People are going to find homes. People are going to already be in these new homes, and there's maybe supply out there that's not going to be satisfied, and they may have to slightly adjust the prices downwards to get those homes rented out in time. So it makes sense. Q2, Q3 being the busiest months, with a little bit more of a downturn to Q4 being the most logical, understanding what Rent Panda explains over here. I'm going to pull up Rent Panda's actual predictions for 2023 quarterly rental increases. It's very interesting. So you look at the very top one over here, put on the left here. Q1, they have it as 2.16%. They predict Q2 being 4.55%, Q3 being 0.61%, and Q4 being 1% in the increases. So all 4 months or all 4 quarters are predicted to be increases, showing a pretty strong rental demand still going to be out there. But many people were kind of concerned that, okay, rents have really skyrocketed. This seems much more stable than it did last month or last year, but it definitely shows that it's still a strong rental market for landlords. What's even interesting as well is if you contrast that to the other major cities in the area. We're talking about Toronto, but it's good to compare it to other big cities. The majority of these cities that are not in Ontario are going to be experiencing, or at least to Rent Panda, they're going to be experiencing some sort of decline in Q4. You're looking at Guelph, Quebec City, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Halifax are all going to see pretty, not major, but definitely decreases in the rental prices in Q4 versus Toronto, Hamilton, Mississauga, Kitchener, and then Montreal. Montreal is the outlier, but those other 5 are all Ontario cities in the GTA market. So that's interesting in terms of comparing the Toronto market versus Vancouver being a really strong rental market as well. The next thing I read about Rent Panda's report is they give a little bit of a summary as well, and they say that rentals are becoming less affordable for families, and they're also saying large cities are becoming less and less affordable for an individual rental. And you can see that very much so. And they give that as a precedent when we look at affordability of a rental. To end off their predictions for the year, that the Rent Panda says what to expect for the rest of the year. Rent declines could be the normal seasonal pattern as prices tend to decline in the winter months and stay that way until at least after the holidays. However, further interest rate hikes combined with continuing inflation will continue to put pressure on renters as more mortgages come up for renewal and less buying power available. In our Canadian-wide rent report, we look at recent market trends, overall rent rates, and affordability metrics to provide a near real-time analysis of the rental market state. And like before, I really agree with that sentiment. If you think about what's going on, and as mentioned before in the video, when it comes to people purchasing, their purchase power is much less of higher interest rates. Again, inflation being at an all-time high as well. Less people are going to be out there buying homes. And if they're not buying homes, people have to live somewhere. And if they're going to live somewhere, they're going to rent. And with more demand in the rental market, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some sort of increase in the rental rates come 2023 as well. And the next graphic that they kind of show is actually pretty staggering. They talk about affordability. And when it comes to affordability, affordability is the household or individual income and how that compares to your housing costs. So whether that be a mortgage, whether that be rental, I believe in this case they're talking about rents, how much does someone's rent compared to the actual income. They talk about how much, let's say I make $100,000, 60,000 or 50,000, that's how much is going to be going towards the rent. And they talk about it in this report, which is pretty staggering in a lot of cases. Okay, so I'm going to dive into it right here. So let's take a look. When it comes to Toronto, the individual affordability, so this would be someone that is one person living alone. The individual affordability based off I believe the average income of someone in Toronto is 113%. So the average income in Toronto does not cover the rent of the average home in Toronto, or the average rent in Toronto. So in that case, you, number one, cannot live by yourself in Toronto. That's the first thing this report is telling me. And then if we look, to the side, we're looking at household affordability. And that would be the amount of people live in a house. So maybe it's a husband and wife, husband, kids, maybe there's 2 partners, who knows what it may be. But one household, 56% of their income is going towards rent, based off their most recent market graphic report. And to give you some background, when it came to a bit of a rental rule that I've actually used a lot in the past, and I may have to adjust that, is a lot of times for housing to be affordable, you want your housing costs to be about 30% of your total income. So there's a huge difference here where individual affordability is 113% versus 30%. We're really far off there. And the reason being is the average income does not cover Toronto rent or Toronto even purchasing power at this point. So there's a big discrepancy between those two numbers. And that's why most people are relying on roommates. They're relying on living together as a household. They're looking to downsize in terms of the space they have, especially for an entry-level property. A lot of people are thinking of living at home for longer because the fact that the average income is not close to the average rent, and that number is so staggering, there has to be some sort of adjustment being made there. And just so you know that I'm not making up numbers right here, if we look at other cities in Toronto, again, being different, not major cities, Saskatoon, Regina, Thunder Bay, Edmonton, these are much more of a friendly rental market. You're looking at an individual income at, closer to 50%, 40%. That's much more realistic. And then when you look at a household income for those cities, you're looking at 29, 36, 32, and all in the 20s in the bottom over here. That's a more realistic number that follows that rule I mentioned before, 30% of your income. Housing over there is much more affordable when it comes to that. You don't need to worry about basically all their paycheck going towards rent or going towards purchasing. It's an interesting contrast. It just, that's the way you got to look at Canada, because when it comes to Canadian real estate, people tend to rely on only a few major cities, being Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and they really don't look outside of that type of stuff when it comes to affordable housing. So the next thing they talk about here is rent rate by province. They don't break it down to Toronto particularly, but we'll talk about Ontario as well. When they went over the month-over-month changes, you're down from November, 0.2%, so slightly down, like I mentioned before. It's a slower rental market, slightly from the really busy summer that we had. But the year-over-year rent change is 8.9% from December of 2022 to December of 2021. The only issue with that is I think it's a little bit skewed because it includes all Ontario cities. Toronto's, I think, is a much higher number when it comes to year-over-year increases for just Toronto. So that's interesting news to say so at least. They said the median rent in Ontario is $2,400 compared to $2,200 of 2021. This is something a little bit different than I typically do. I have usually my own rental numbers that I go through. I wanted to switch it up and go through just a different report that looks at Canada as a whole and compares it that way. In the future, I will be going over rental numbers on YouTube, not just my Instagram, on a monthly basis that goes just in terms of the affordability of different types of condos in Toronto, different types of houses and such. But rent's something that's super important to first-time buyers, and keeping track of that is just as important. Maybe comparing the rent numbers versus your buying numbers, getting a sense of what a rent buys you in Toronto, and then obviously seeing how rents increase, how different things change. So it's something that I'm going to be consistently doing on this YouTube channel as well. Thanks for tagging along. If you have any questions about the Toronto real estate market in general, give me a shout. In my bio, you can book a calendar link with me, get in my schedule, talk about real estate anytime that you'd like. And overall, you know where to reach me in terms of I have weekly content coming on here every Thursday. Every Wednesday, we have an Instagram video that goes live talking about the Toronto real estate market as well. And then every Tuesday, we have Future Homeowners. It's a newsletter I have just first-time buyers. Link in my bio to sign up. And again, I'm here to help first-time buyers in the Toronto market. So I look forward to hearing about your situation and helping you turn those dreams into a reality or turn those homes into a reality. Thanks so much. Take care as always. Bye.